Janus Raleigh had heard tales of Vashura 9, a planet dismissed by most as barren and hostile, yet whispered about in old star maps and adventurer legends as a graveyard of ancient secrets. Few explorers had ever dared venture that far, and even fewer had returned to tell the tale. But to Janus, whose thirst for discovery outpaced any fear of the unknown, Vashura 9 was a challenge he couldn't resist. His ship, the Wanderer, touched down in a rare clearing amid a landscape of dense, towering jungles and thick mist that seemed almost alive, curling around trees as if concealing secrets. From the moment he set foot on the planet's surface, the air felt charged with an otherworldly energy, an unnatural stillness, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the far-off cries of unseen creatures. He moved carefully through the jungle, his every step sinking slightly into the alien soil, which seemed to have an unnatural elasticity. Above, the canopy formed a thick green web, allowing only fractured beams of sunlight to filter through, casting strange shadows that danced as he moved. Days passed as he trekked deeper into the jungle, his path guided only by the faint readings on his scanner. Occasionally, the scanner would pick up strange energy signatures, short pulses, almost as if something far below the surface was flickering in and out of existence. Fascinated, Janus pushed further, barely sleeping as the patterns grew more intense, aligning with stories he'd read of ancient civilizations with technology and knowledge beyond anything humanity had yet to uncover. He thought he might be nearing a breakthrough, but nothing had prepared him for what lay just beyond a wall of dense vines. He hacked through the last barrier of foliage, and the jungle opened up, revealing a hidden clearing. There, surrounded by towering trees and blanketed in a ghostly mist, was a village unlike anything he had ever seen. The structures didn't resemble anything made by human hands. They looked grown rather than built, angular, crystalline formations emerging from the earth as if shaped by some organic force. The structures shone faintly in the dim light, their surfaces glimmering with symbols that seemed to pulse, giving the entire village an unearthly glow. Janus approached, the soft glow of the symbols illuminating his path. They looked like runes, twisting and flowing, almost alive, whispering in an alien language that seemed to resonate at the edges of his consciousness. As Janus stepped into the heart of the village, the atmosphere thickened with a strange, almost reverent silence. The crystalline structures around him rose in varied sizes and shapes, some short and squat, others towering overhead in spirals and faceted peaks. They were eerily beautiful, their surfaces catching and refracting the dim light filtering through the jungle canopy, casting streaks of green, blue, and violet across the mist. Each building seemed carved from a single piece of crystal, its edges sharp, polished to a mirror sheen, and entirely untouched by time. He drew closer to the nearest structure, marveling at the symbols that twisted along its walls. They glowed with a steady, pulsing light, but with every step he took, they shifted slightly in hue, casting an eerie green glow that faintly warmed to blue as he neared. The symbols reminded him of ancient glyphs or runes, yet they were so intricately layered that his eyes couldn't fully focus on them. They seemed to dance, vibrating in place, as if infused with a consciousness of their own. He felt the distinct sensation that the symbols weren't merely decorative but served some purpose, perhaps as a language or a conduit of energy, a way of channeling power throughout the village. Moving further in, Janus noticed artifacts scattered around the village square, as though the villagers had simply vanished in the middle of their lives, leaving everything behind. Strange tools lay beside doorways. Small crystalline objects resembling ceremonial masks rested atop pedestals, and what looked like elongated bowls were arranged in clusters, each filled with tiny, preserved plants and stones that sparkled faintly in the low light. A network of pathways connected the buildings, each carefully lined with similar glowing stones, suggesting a well-organized community with a clear sense of purpose. The air in the village felt denser, heavier, almost as if it held onto memories. Janus felt a faint pressure at the back of his mind, as if whispers were trying to reach him from a great distance. Every step seemed to echo through the space, amplifying his presence. A strange energy coursed through the village, making the hair on his arms stand on end. At the center of the village, towering above all the crystalline structures, stood a massive obelisk, sharp-edged and imposing, seemingly hewn from the same iridescent material as the buildings around it. Its surface was etched with even more symbols than the village structures, spiraling lines of alien glyphs, intricately layered and interwoven in patterns that defied logic, bending and twisting in ways that seemed to shift whenever he blinked. The obelisk's base was partially buried in the earth, with thick, root-like tendrils of crystal sprawling outwards and anchoring it firmly, as though it had grown up from the planet's core itself. Janus approached, captivated by the obelisk's faint blue glow, which pulsed like a heartbeat, sending ripples of light up its sides in a steady, rhythmic cadence. He felt a subtle vibration in the air around it, as if the obelisk was humming with an ancient energy, dormant yet powerful. Its height was staggering, and looking up, he saw its tip disappear into the mist that hung above the village, making it seem almost infinite, as though it stretched into the very fabric of the sky. The obelisk radiated a presence, a quiet, solemn authority that seemed to anchor the entire village in an invisible web of energy. Moving closer, he noticed that the symbols carved into the obelisk were different from those on the village structures. They were larger, sharper, and arranged in concentric patterns around several deep grooves that ran the length of the obelisk. The grooves themselves held faintly luminescent crystals that pulsed in unison with the obelisk's heartbeat, giving the impression that some vast, ancient intelligence was waiting just beneath the surface, watching, listening. As he ran his fingers along one of the grooves, he could feel a faint warmth emanating from within, a hint of life pulsing beneath the hard, crystalline shell. Around the base of the obelisk, other, smaller stones were arranged in a precise circle, each one engraved with a unique rune that glowed green when he got close. The arrangement seemed deliberate, ceremonial, as if the obelisk had once served as a focal point for gatherings or rituals. He couldn't shake the feeling that it had a purpose far beyond decoration, that it was more than just an ancient relic. The symbols on its surface seemed almost to shift and reform under his gaze, aligning themselves into patterns he could nearly, but not quite, understand. As Janus stood by the towering obelisk, a cold breeze swept through the clearing, chilling him despite the humid jungle air. He noticed the atmosphere around him growing heavier, almost electrically charged, as if some invisible presence had awoken in response to his touch. The faint pulsing glow of the obelisk intensified, casting elongated shadows across the ground, and in the dim, shifting light, he thought he saw movement flickering at the edges of his vision. He froze, his breath caught in his throat, as pale, transparent figures began to materialize in the mist around him. They were tall, graceful beings, with elongated limbs and delicate features that seemed to shimmer in and out of focus. Their eyes, dark and deep, like twin voids speckled with stars, gazed out with a strange, mournful wisdom, watching him as if from another realm. Each figure was draped in what looked like robes spun from light itself, the translucent fabric shifting with an ethereal glow as they moved. Their presence filled the village with a solemn, silent reverence, as though a forgotten history was replaying itself before him. The beings floated rather than walked, gliding across the ground with a silence so complete it felt unnatural, as though they existed on the edges of reality. As they moved closer to him, Janus could feel a strange pressure building in his mind, as if the air itself were whispering secrets, ancient and incomprehensible. The beings surrounded the obelisk, their movements synchronized, each gesture purposeful, as if following a silent ritual. Though they made no sound, he could feel their words in his mind, a collective voice that spoke in unison, echoing memories and emotions that weren't his own. Janus realized these weren't merely phantoms but sentient beings, echoes of those who had once inhabited this place. Their expressions were filled with sorrow, their faces contorted in a mixture of longing and regret, as though they were bound to this village by an invisible thread, unable to move on. He could feel their gaze upon him, a weighty, sorrowful scrutiny that seemed to reach into his soul, peeling back layers of his own mind, as if searching for something within him. The air around Janus grew colder as the ghostly beings gathered closer, their forms shimmering with an eerie luminescence that seemed to pulse in time with the obelisk's faint glow. He could feel their collective gaze upon him, heavy and ancient, as if weighed down by millennia of memories and secrets. Then, in a silent chorus that echoed through his mind rather than his ears, the beings began to speak, their voices a haunting, layered harmony that resonated deep within his consciousness. "Wanderer," they intoned, their words carrying a gravity that made his heart pound. "You have come to the place of the forgotten, where we, the echoes, remain bound by time and duty. We are the guardians, the witnesses to a power too terrible to be released." The spectral figures shifted slightly, their translucent faces filled with a deep, otherworldly sadness, as though they bore a burden too heavy to bear. He sensed their hesitation, as if they did not want to reveal what lay within this ancient place. But something had changed since his arrival. By disturbing the village, by touching the obelisk, he had somehow begun a process that could not easily be reversed. One of the beings, taller than the rest and draped in a shimmering robe of stardust, drifted forward, its gaze piercing yet filled with a strange, sorrowful understanding. Its voice became clearer, resonating with an intensity that shook him to his core. "You have awakened what was meant to be forgotten. The obelisk you touched is a lock, a seal that binds an ancient darkness we sacrificed everything to contain." Janus felt a chill run down his spine as the words sank in. The obelisk wasn't just a relic, it was a prison, and his touch had somehow weakened its hold, stirring the entity bound within, rousing it from its eternal slumber. The beings looked upon him with a mixture of pity and urgency, their voices growing in intensity. "The seal has weakened," they continued, "and now the shadows stir, the darkness eager to consume once more. If you do not restore the binding, it will break free, unleashing chaos upon this world and beyond. We gave our lives, our souls, to protect the galaxy from this horror, but the ritual has grown fragile with time." The pressure on Janus's mind intensified, as if the beings were forcing him to understand the magnitude of the danger. He could see flashes of their memories, a vision of star-spanning wars, of planets swallowed by fire and shadow, of an ancient force so malevolent it threatened the fabric of reality itself. This was no ordinary threat. It was a being of pure destruction, a force that had once brought devastation upon their world and countless others. And somehow, his presence had disturbed the delicate balance holding it back. "The ritual can be renewed," they said, their tone heavy with resignation. "But it comes at a cost, Wanderer." Janus stood in the circle of ghostly figures, his mind reeling as the weight of their warning settled on him like an iron shroud. The obelisk's pulse had grown erratic, its once steady glow flickering with a sense of urgency, as if the ancient power it held was struggling to break free. The echoes gazed at him with somber eyes, and he understood that there was only one way to restore the seal, but the price would be steep. One of the echoes stepped forward, reaching out an ethereal hand that hovered inches from Janus's chest. He could feel a faint warmth emanating from the gesture, a strange energy that seeped into him, binding him to the task. The binding requires a life force, a living soul to rekindle its power and renew its strength. They whispered, their words both a command and a plea. Janus realized they weren't asking for his life in the literal sense, but rather a piece of his very essence, a part of himself that he could never get back. Taking a deep breath, he closed his eyes and nodded, surrendering to the task. As he extended his hand toward the obelisk, he felt a surge of energy flow through him, a sensation like liquid fire as it drew from his own life force, pulling strands of his energy and intertwining them with the crystalline structure. The obelisk responded, its symbols blazing brighter, casting an intense, blinding light across the village. He could feel himself weakening, a deep, numbing exhaustion spreading through his limbs, as though he was being drained from within. The echoes chanted in low, resonant voices that vibrated through the air, an ancient language that he couldn't understand but somehow felt deeply within him. With each word, the pull grew stronger, tugging more of his essence into the obelisk, weaving it into the threads of the binding ritual. His vision blurred, the world around him dimming as he gave more of himself to strengthen the seal. The crystalline structures in the village shimmered, resonating in harmony with the obelisk, as though the entire settlement was participating in the ritual, channeling the energy into a unified force. He felt parts of his memories slipping away, small pieces of his past vanishing into the depths of the obelisk, forever lost. Moments of joy, laughter, friends, and family, all faded, leaving an emptiness within him that he could already tell would never heal. In exchange, the obelisk grew stronger, its pulsing light stabilizing as the ritual neared completion. The echoes' voices grew softer, their chants resonating in a gentle, mournful cadence, as though they, too, were bidding farewell to the part of him he would never reclaim.